Huh? Second canto, third chapter, verse 17. Okay, so I'll screen share. Are you getting my screen share?
What?
Okay. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Ajnana Timirandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manovistam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Gadamayam Dadati Svapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunatam Vitam Tvam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Shri Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padam Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakan Vitamscha He Krishna Karuna Sindho Dinabhando Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Rishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priya Vansha Kalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhu Vevacha Patitanam Bhavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Garadhara Shivasari Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayam Udirayat. Before reciting the Srimad Bhagavatam, which is the very means of conquest, one should offer respectful obeisances unto the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Narayan, unto Narayan Rishi, the supermost human being, and unto Mother Saraswati, the goddess of learning, and unto Vyasadeva, the author. Nasta Prayesha Bhadreshu Nityam Bhagavati Sevaya Bhagavati Uttama Shloke Bhaktir Bhavati Naishtike Namam Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prashtaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Tinamine Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Pasyatyade Satarine. Okay, so Srimad Bhagavatam, second canto, third chapter, verse 17. So we'll begin with word for word. Word for word, call and response. Ayu of life. Harati Vai Sam Udyan Astam Yan Aso Tasya Rite Yad Shana Nita Uttama Shloka Vartaya Ayurharati Vaipumsam
Ayurharati vai pumsam.
Udyanastam shayanaso.
Udyanastam shayanaso.
Dasyarte yakshano nita.
Dasyate yakshano nita.
Uttama shloka vartaya.
Uttama shloka.
Ayurharati vai pumsam.
Ayurharati vai pumsam.
Udyanastam shayanaso.
Udyanastam shayanaso.
Dasyarte yakshano nita.
Dasyate yakshano nita.
Uttama shloka vartaya.
Uttama shloka vartaya.
Ayurharati vai pumsam.
Ayurharati vai pumsam.
Udyanastam shayanaso.
Udyanastam shayanaso.
Dasyarte yakshano nita.
Dasyate yakshano nita.
Uttama shloka vartaya.
Shloka vartaya. Ayurharati vai pumsam.
Ayurharati vai pumsam.
Udyanastam shayanaso.
Udyanastam shayanaso.
Dasyate yakshano nita.
Dasyate yakshano nita.
Shloka vartaya.
Uttama
Shloka vartaya.
Ayurharati vai pumsam.
Ayurharati vai pumsam.
Udyamastam shayanasam.
Udyanastam shayanaso.
Dasyate yakshano nita.
Dasyante
Yakshano
Uttama shloka vartaya.
Uttama shloka vartaya.
Ayurharati vai pumsam.
Ayurharati vai
pumsam.
Udyanastam shayamasau.
Udyanastam shayanaso.
Tasyarte yakshano nita.
Dasyarte yakshano nita.
Uttama shloka vartaya.
Uttama shloka vartaya. Ayurharati vai pumsam.
Ayurharati vai pumsam.
Udyanastam shayanaso.
Udyanastam shayanaso.
Dasyarte yakshano nita.
Dasyarte yakshano nita.
Uttama shloka vartaya.
Uttama shloka vartaya.
Ayurharati vai pumsam.
Ayurharati vai pumsam.
Udyanastam shayanaso.
Udyanastam shayanaso.
Dasyate yakshano nita.
Dasyarte yakshano nita.
Uttama shloka vartaya.
Uttama shloka vartaya.
Ayurharati vai pumsam.
Ayurharati vai pumsam.
Udyanastam chayanaso.
Udyanastam shayanaso.
Tasyarte yakshano nita.
Dasyarte yakshano nita.
Uttama shloka vartaya.
Uttama shloka vartaya. Would anyone else online like to repeat the verse? Ayu,
Ayu,
duration of life.
duration of life.
Harati,
Harati,
decreases.
decreases.
Vai,
Vai,
certainly.
certainly.
Pumsam,
Pumsam,
of the people.
of the people.
Udyan,
Udyan,
rising.
rising.
Astam,
Astam,
setting.
setting.
Cha,
Cha,
also.
also.
Yan,
Yan,
moving.
moving.
Aso,
Asa,
the sun.
the sun.
Dasya,
Dasya,
of one who glorifies the Lord.
of one who glorifies the Lord.
Rite,
Rite,
except.
except.
Yat,
Yat,
by whom.
by whom.
Shana,
Shana,
time.
time.
Nita,
Nita,
utilize
utilize
Uttama Shloka,
Uttama Shloka,
the all-good personality of Godhead,
the all-good personality of Godhead,
Vartaya,
Vartaya,
in the topics of.
in the topics of.
Translation. Both by rising and by setting, the sun decreases the duration of life of everyone, except one who utilizes the time by discussing topics of the all-good personality of Godhead. So before I read the purport, I just wanted to say that I've gone back in time a little bit from our current group reading of the Srimad Bhagavatam to speak a little bit about time. It was my birthday yesterday, and I was reflecting on time and what it is, how it manifests in my life, my experience of it, and what is good use of time. So I'll read the purport now. Purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Srila Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. This verse indirectly confirms the greater importance of utilizing the human form of life to realize our lost relationship with the Supreme Lord by acceleration of devotional service. Time and tide wait for no man, so the time indicated by the sunrise and the sunset will be uselessly wasted if such time is not properly utilized for realizing identification of spiritual values. Even a fraction of the duration of life wasted cannot be compensated by any amount of gold. Human life is simply awarded to a living entity, Jiva, so that he can realize his spiritual identity and his permanent source of happiness. A living being, especially the human being, is seeking happiness because happiness is the natural situation of the living entity. But he is vainly seeking happiness in the material atmosphere. A living being is constitutionally a spiritual sparkle of the complete whole, and his happiness can be perfectly perceived in spiritual activities. The Lord is the complete spirit whole, and his name, form, quality, pastimes, entourage, and personality are all identical with him. Once a person comes into contact with any one of the above-mentioned energies of the Lord through the proper channel of devotional service, the door to perfection is immediately opened. In the Bhagavad Gita, chapter 2, verse 40, the Lord has explained such contact in the following words. Endeavors in devotional service are never baffled, nor is there failure. A slight beginning of such activities is sufficient even to deliver a person from the great ocean of material fears. As a highly potent drug injected intravenously acts at once on the whole body, the transcendental topics of the Lord, injected through the ear by the pure devotee of the Lord, can act very efficiently. Oral realization of the transcendental messages implies total realization, just as fructification of one part of the tree implies fructification of all other parts. This realization, for a moment in the association of pure devotees like Sukadev Goswami, prepares one's complete life for eternity. And thus the sun fails to rob the pure devotee of his duration of life, inasmuch as he is constantly busy in the devotional service of the Lord, purifying his existence. Death is a symptom of the material infection of the eternal living being. Only due to material infection is the eternal living entity subjected to the law of birth, death, old age, and disease. The materialistic way of pious activities, like charity, is recommended in the Smriti Shastras, as quoted by Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur. Money given in charity to a suitable person is guaranteed bank balance in the next life. Such charity is recommended to be given to a Brahmana. If the money is given in charity to a non-Brahmana without Brahminical qualification, the money is returned in the next life in the same proportion. If it is given in charity to a half-educated Brahmana, even then the money is returned double. If the money is given in charity to a learned and fully qualified Brahmana, the money is returned 100 and 1,000 times. And if the money is given to a Veda Paraga, one who has factually realized the path of the Vedas, it is returned by unlimited multiplication. The ultimate end of Vedic knowledge is realization of the personality of Godhead, Lord Krishna, as stated in the Bhagavad Gita. Vedaischa sarve raham eva vidya. There is a guarantee of monies being returned if given in charity, regardless of the proportion. Similarly, a moment passed in association of a pure devotee by hearing and chanting the transcendental messages of the Lord is a perfect guarantee for eternal life, for returning home back to Godhead. Madhama gatva punar janma na vidyate. In other words, a devotee of the Lord is guaranteed eternal life. A devotee's old age or disease in the present life is but an impetus to such guaranteed eternal life. Srila Prabhupada. So I want to start with sharing. For me, the beauty in just understanding the concept and context of time through Srila Prabhupada's teachings, through the Vedas, as given to us by our parampara. Because I turned 31 yesterday, and a part of me is like, well, this is a significant amount of time. And in relative terms, there's some significance. I do feel like I've experienced something, and I experienced changes in my body, in my mind, and I was telling a friend the other day that I'm starting to see a garden of ear hairs being cultivated here, and they sent me a picture of Srila Prabhupada with very bushy ears, and I instantly felt like, oh wow, what a privilege! I can, yeah, it's interesting to be given an opportunity to just reflect on time and how I'm using my time. And this verse stood out. Dear Govinda Prabhu helped me with a few verses to inspire and educate myself. Yesterday was May 1st, and I was thinking of the mayfly, which is a fly that lives in like a larval stage for like a year, kind of just, and then it manifests as a fly for a day, and in that time it goes to school, goes to the movies, gets a girlfriend, gets married, has kids, and then dies in 24 hours. And in relative time, I'm sure that feels like a very long, rich life for the fly. And for us, it's like, oh, that's just one day, that's nothing. And if we look at this in terms of Vedic cosmology, we can look at a day of Brahma, which is about 4 billion years, and then the universe is said to exist for 100 years of Brahma. So it's like 300 something trillion, 40 billion years, and then start over, and that life for Brahma to us seems inconceivably long, but for Brahma it's just a few days and nights, and then a few years, and then that's life. And so in that context of eternal time, we can begin to see how puny the drama of our material condition and this little kind of play that we're in is. And so much of the Vedas have to do with time. The Bhagavad Gita, one of the 4 main subject matters of the Gita is time. So there's Ishvara, God, the supreme controller, the Jiva, the individual soul, us, karma, action, and then Kala, time. So clearly it's important for us to begin to understand time and the context that we're in, and to begin to see time as Krishna himself. Krishna says, Kalosmin, I am time. destroyer of worlds, destroyer of all people. So that's this very powerful, intimidating sort of statement. And there's another verse in the Bhagavatam, in the 3rd canto, chapter 10, verse 11, Maitreya. This is, I believe we were reading close to this the other day, and Maitreya is telling Vidura about Krishna and different aspects of Krishna. And he says, eternal time is the primeval source of the interactions of the 3 modes of material nature. It is unchangeable and limitless, and it works as the instrument of the Supreme Personality of Godhead for his pastimes in the material creation. And in the purport, Srila Prabhupada goes on to say that the impersonal time factor is the background of the material manifestation as the instrument of the Supreme Lord. It is the ingredient of assistance offered to material nature. So time is this ingredient that we exhibit our karma and our actions, our reactions, like it's part of this field where we're acting, and those actions are very temporary. You know, things that I take very seriously and obsess about and get lost in these dramas of this relationship, this work, this thing, they're, you know, to a certain extent meaningless when they're disconnected from eternal time. And what is eternal time? It's Krishna. It's that impersonal aspect of Krishna, Vishnu, manifest, pervading all the atoms of the universe. And if we look at, you know, as a modern society, we've really, you know, taken a look at time from a lot of different perspectives of physics and Sankhya philosophy. But if you look at the Bhagavatam, thousands of years old, written, it's an eternal wisdom passed down. And if you look at it, then in the 3rd canto, we're given atomic time. The material manifestation's ultimate particle, which is indivisible and not formed into a body, is called the atom. It exists always as an indivisible identity, even after the dissolution of all forms. The material body is but a combination of such atoms, but it is misunderstood by the common man. So if we see that these tiny particles, which all have Vishnu in them, which are all a part of Krishna's universal form, we're just made of these fluctuating atoms, and as they move through eternity, we call that time, right? And ultimately, Krishna is the only one moving, and Krishna is the only one acting, and so it's something somewhat inconceivable for sure. And so in the main verse that we're reading from, Srila Prabhupada is giving us the secret to exit relative time and the crushing force, the devouring mouth of time, into what is eternal time. How do we enter into eternity? Not just at the end of this life, but within this life, within each moment. So by the grace of sadhu sangha, of connection with a pure devotee like Srila Prabhupada, who has not only has complete understanding of the impersonal aspect of time, but more relevant to us, he has direct relationship, pure devotional love for the personal aspect of time, for Krishna, for Shyamasundar Krishna. So by beginning to, there's a verse in the Sri Upanishad, verse 15, where, you know, it's saying, please remove your dazzling effulgence this impersonal, dazzling effulgence, and show let me see your beautiful face. The pure devotee is asking to have darshan, to have to be witness to God's personal feature. So it's inconceivable for us without the help of a pure devotee to look out into the world. Even if we tap into the present moment, which is that in itself is an elevated state, to begin to, if we're present, we can begin to really truly experience our experience. We can become totally immersed by a sunrise, nature, and we can begin to have impersonal realization of Krishna, of Vishnu, this all-pervading divinity, beauty, awe, intensity. We can have some realization like that. And yet without the pure devotee, we can't really connect that to the personality that is the one engaging all of that. That is the source of the eternity that we are, the eternal indestructible quanta of consciousness that we are. So yeah, there's sadhusanga, sarva, sarva siddhi hoy, lava matra sadhusanga,
Sadhusanga, sarva, shastre koi, amatra
sarva siddhi hoy. Yeah, so only just a moment in association with a pure devotee of Krishna completely, radically, like, can help us advance in devotional service. Just a moment. So by hearing from a pure devotee through Srila Prabhupada's books, like by hearing the pastimes of Krishna, of Lord Chaitanya, their entourage, and by beginning to engage in devotional service, we can, by chanting the Maha Mantra given to us by a pure devotee, we can begin to enter into a space that goes beyond, all this time, that which is crushed. I know for me, I'm 31, and I look at my life, and it's felt like just like a flash, and yet within it there's so much dramas and stories and intensity, and then I can take a look now, having endeavored to chant some and follow some instruction to a certain extent, and I can see that that's truly what feels meaningful and feels like real advancement. Everything else for me has felt like, I've been like in the same place, just kind of like walking around a room going, I don't know. And there's and the compassion of the pure devotees who understanding the greater context is watching us, just like we're watching a dog or a mayfly have its life and do its thing. We might think like, oh, the dog's just being a dog, we think like, oh, its life is not that important. And then if we were to look like from a little higher at our own lives, we can get so caught up in it. And then if we, with some perspective given to us by someone with greater understanding, we can begin to see it. We're just like kind of going around in circles over and over again. And out of great compassion, the pure devotees are saying, hey, wake up, Jeev Jago, like wake up. You're going around in a circle. You're in Maya, and you're going around in a circle, and they're giving us something like the key to eternity in the form of bhakti, in the form of accessing that seed of divine love within each one of us, watering that seed, chanting and following their guidance in order to begin to get out of this illusion that 10 years have passed and my business and my children and that's the only reality, that there's something much greater. So the challenge might become for many of us, it's like, well, I'm not going to just give up those things. So they're really meeting us where we're at and showing us how it's about spiritualizing those activities. So those activities in and of themselves aren't transcendental, they're not eternal. And yet we can begin to spiritualize them. We can begin to enter eternity through our circumstantial activities by yukta vairagya, by offering them to Krishna, by dovetailing our work, our family duties, our personal life, by beginning to dovetail these things, we begin to actually take part in our eternal dharma, in sanatan dharma, in waking up the eternal nature of our soul and remembering Krishna. And this is what the pure devotees are constantly doing. There's in Bhagavad Gita 10:9, Krishna said, Machita Madgata Prana Bodhayanta Parasparam Gatayantaschamam Nityam Tushyanti Charamam Ticha. The thoughts of his pure devotees, of the pure devotees of the Lord, are always absorbed in Krishna and serving Krishna with love. So when we're aspiring to connect with Srila Prabhupada, with the pure devotees, we're being given a direct link, because that link is so strong. They're completely absorbed constantly. We could say their signal, is strong. And for us, if we're endeavoring on a path without this guidance, we might try to get a little bit of signal in, but we might get a little. But once we connect to the strength of the signal of the pure devotee, then we can really tap into a strong flow of mercy. We can really begin to make movement, quantum leaps and jumps into our own experience of eternity. I was just to reflect a little bit on also the cosmological view. For me, I really appreciate science and physics and understanding the context from a mundane perspective. That's entertained me for a lot of my life. And I really like Carl Sagan, renowned astronomer, and he was fascinated by the Vedas and the Vedic cosmology, and to paraphrase, has a quote about how the Vedic time model is the only one that really can parallel our current understanding of time. And Carl Sagan has a beautiful sort of poetic narration called Pale Blue Dot, which I encourage anyone to watch just to see. He begins talking about all of our lives and all of the histories of all these, of kings, of empires, of societies, of plagues and diseases, and everything we've ever known happened on this pale blue dot, this tiny speck. He says a mote of dust floating on a sunbeam, or resting on a sunbeam. And that reminds me of Krishna, saying how everything is resting on him like a string of pearls. And so it's I see how in myself I get, without endeavoring to chant and to read, it's really easy to fall into like, well, this is everything, and my problem is everything, and this pandemic is everything, and this, you know, and suddenly it's like it's all consuming, and then to be given that chance to see the perspective that this is all happening in this like infinite universe and infinite eternal time, and that, you know, that really helps me kind of like snap out of it and be like, oh yeah, there's something beyond this. Yeah, I think that's all I have to share, and I would love to hear comments, questions, and I'll read the verse over one more time, and then we can discuss it, and I would love to hear anyone sharing around their experience of time. So, Ayurharati vai pumsam udyanastam chayanaso dasyarte yatchano nita utamashloka vartaya. Both by rising and by setting, the sun decreases the duration of life for everyone, except one who utilizes the time by discussing topics of the all-good personality of Godhead. Yeah. So would anyone like to share any questions, comments, realizations? Yeah, Bhakti.
Yeah, I wasn't going to say it. I wasn't going to speak it, but then there was two coincidental things that you said that relate to my experience, so I figured I might as well go ahead with it. So relation with time and connection with the pure devotee. This is when I first went across Canada with some brahmacharis to a village in the mountains, Sharanagati. It's where Mother Yamuna was living for the last while in life. And it just so happened, thankfully, Radhanath Swami was there. And there was some young guy, he was considering suicide and whatever. And I was talking him through it. And then he said he wanted to talk to Radhanath Swami. So I went over to him, put my arm over his shoulder, and asked him if he would want to come talk to this guy. And he was going out to this big teepee they had set outside to do kirtan. And he said, these people are waiting for me. What's his name? I can't talk to him. What's his name? And I told him his name, and then he left. But I realized when he said that, when he said that these people are waiting for me to sing for them, it was like resolute determination, pure resolute determination. Like this is the last thing that he's doing it before his last breath of life, you know. And there was no anger in it, there was no force or nothing, not like in the movies. And I found that really interesting. And then later on, it was only like last year, so like 9 years before I made this other connection. There was he really understood purely that death can come at any moment. And every moment of his life is with resolute determination to give everything for that, you know. I don't really have very much realization on that myself because I waste too much time in my day. But I can definitely see my experience over the last little while where I was considering giving up and just kind of like leaving the spiritual path and not really giving much time to those things. But I get the clear realization that anything but the spiritual path is death, you know. that's what it was not very much advancement happening in that period that I was going through, but definitely it was like I showed that if I'm not moving on a spiritual path, then that's death, you know. So yeah, where am I putting my time? Where am I putting my effort in things that are not conducive for my self-realization and the spiritual path, or am I putting them towards things that are better for that and seeking the right association? And so yeah.
Thank you for sharing. I hear you're in that question, and it sounds like you were inspired to see someone really go into a very empowered urgency around their spiritual life. And yeah, I hear you're in the question of how to best utilize your time, how to really engage yourself in Krishna consciousness and spiritual life. And yeah, I'm inspired by you just being in that question. I think that's such an important part for me. It's just to be in the question of like how can I actually give meaning to this and use my time wisely. And in the context of this verse, you know, it's like the sun is coming up and setting, and I can go into a place of like, oh man, like, yeah, I'm not talking about Krishna, I'm not chanting all day, I'm not associating with devotees all day, and like it's kind of, it can be a little like, oh well, my life's worthless and useless, and to a certain extent that is real. And in the purport, you know, Srila Prabhupada is giving us that there's no loss or diminution. He's quoting that verse where Krishna is telling us any time that we're devoting, any time that we're giving to this is not lost. And I was recently also thinking about how like being that everything is Krishna, when we offer, you know, a flower to Krishna or prasadam to Krishna, it's like we're offering Krishna to Krishna. It's like, okay, like Krishna already has everything. He has all opulences, all riches. Yeah, in doing that, we're awakening that love relationship, that exchange, and Krishna feels that, he sees that, and that goes, like as Prabhupada says, like into our bank account, you know, into our eternal bank account. And I was reflecting on the image of like offering water back to the Ganga, like, okay, it's Ganges water, yet that action is transcendental. And then, you know, offering like Krishna's time, then offering time back to Krishna is kind of that same action of, and it's like true in action. It's like true, it's what truly steps out of karma, because like we're breaking this cycle of action reaction where we're giving directly back onto the source, onto Krishna, and that time then transforms into eternal time, into spiritual time. So something I'm like wanting to conceive of and inspire me in how I use my time.
Thanks.
I have a comment also.
Dominic, I think I saw your hand first, and then maybe dear Govinda and Isaac.
I think in your talk you shared something about being in the present moment. I don't know what you said, but I've been thinking about just being present in the moment, and how that's like really important, because you're not like lamenting or hankering for anything in the past or future. And I don't really know, I don't feel like I have realization about it, except that when I'm with children, like my children, being in the present moment is everything. Like, it's like what they crave, it's where they're at, and they want me to meet them there. And that's where people want, that's what we want when we're with others, to be present. And I'm sure Krishna wants that. So it's really important to be in the present in the moment. but I don't know. I just don't I have like an intuition about it, but I wonder, because there's a childish way to be present in the moment where you're not planning anything, you know, and you're not recognizing the effect of the past or the effect of your past. So we have to take a look at the past and future. I don't know. Do you have anything to share on the present moment and what I'm saying?
Yeah, thanks for your comment. I get you see the importance of being present and, like, you know, honoring your family and your responsibilities. And yeah, it sounds like you're wondering how to truly be present and at the same time responsible, like using your intelligence, like, to plan things. And yeah, I know with the family, it's especially important. And I what came up for me is thinking about like watering the root of the tree. And you know, we're talking about time, and Bhakti was talking about death, and you know, a lot of the times we're watering a branch out here without watering the root, and the tree will die if we do that. And so for me, there's like more and more subtle ways of being present. Like there's, okay, I can focus on my breath or something, or be put in a state of more presence by something awe-inspiring like the sunset, or something that happens that like just like kind of shocks me into being in the material moment, which is still like, that's still way more advanced than where I'm generally at, which is in like the dreamscape of the past and the future, and like, yeah. But then I think like even more subtle than that is, you know, when we're aspiring to see Krishna in you know, in our relationships and our loved ones, and how we can serve Krishna through our relationships, through our engagements, because Krishna is behind all of those things. He's within all of those things. And as, I mean, I don't have so much realization. Well, I don't have any realization of that. But that's definitely where I go, is like aspiring to be, you know, to serve the humble sage who sees all beings as equal, because he's seeing Paramatma, he's seeing Krishna within each living entity. You know, for me, like hearing from the pure devotee, aspiring to serve the pure devotee, then my sense is like gradually I will see more and more of that, you know, Krishna is behind everything and everyone, and then that's like being fully present. You know, that's my sense of it. I'm happy to hear more if you have more to share that came up with your Govinda. It sounds like.
Well, yes, I appreciate the discussion. I'm reminded there's a time in the Softo Advanced Seminar, and where during ground rules, and actually we started instituting this a few years after some of you took the advanced seminar. But anyhow, so we have two ground rules, and we say, oh, these two go together. And one is to participate 100%, and the next is be responsible to not injure yourself or injure others or damage property. And then we explain, well, they go together, because we might misunderstand that, well, if I'm fully giving 100%, fully present, then, you know, we just don't know who might get hurt. And so it implies it's very much a false dichotomy, that to be fully present means like I'm not thinking, I'm just like there. It's just like, it's like emotional, and it's a false or a very incomplete understanding. And so full presence doesn't mean like we're turning off our brain, or we're turning off our sense of responsibility. It means I'm fully present spiritually, emotionally, on all levels, and I'm fully present with my analytical faculties and my sense of responsibility, And so just, I mean, what comes to me in hearing, your question, Dominique, is like full presence means, but full presence doesn't mean I don't go to the realm of thought and planning. It means I go to thought and planning consciously with awareness. I can be fully present, and in that full presence, I'm choosing to analyze the past and learning from it. I can be fully present, and I'm choosing to assess the future and consider the future. That's different than being pulled by the modes of passion, and I'm in anxiety about the future because I don't know what will happen. Then I'm not present. Present means subject. Full presence is different than I'm pulled by the modes of ignorance and I'm lamenting about the past and I'm regretting and I'm in depression and despondency. So full presence includes the capacity to choose to enter into the world of thinking and planning. And that's why for me there's no contradiction there between being fully present and sometimes planning the future and analyzing the past.
It seems that what's said doing that is thinking like living in a moment. And so when I'm in a moment, maybe I'm planning, maybe I'm looking, I'm processing the past, but not for the moment. Because when we live for the moment, that's where we regret, we lament, and we anchor for something different, because the moment is just what it is.
Yeah, thanks for that, Melanie. Yeah, living for the moment, we can misunderstand that in a kind of fluffy, sentimental way. That's what it means to be fully present. No, but living for the moment means I'm not present with my intelligence and my sense of responsibility. It means I'm not present with those important dimensions of myself.
That's all really helpful. Thank you. I've spent so much time with children, and it included all the time caregiving. Like, it wasn't just a playmate. I wasn't acting as a playmate, although I felt present, playful, curious with children. I feel like children are a wonderful chance to practice being in the moment, living in the moment. But if you're in a caregiving role, then you have a responsibility. You know that the meal time's coming up, and the clock. You're aware of the clock, and So I have a lot of experience with living in the moment, especially with all that time I've spent with children. And so I feel like I love it, really. I love the feeling of living in the moment. Anyway, yeah, that's helpful to think of being present with every part of me, intellectual, emotional, spiritual, physical, that makes complete sense. Anyway, thank you.
To share. I'd like to follow up on your question, Dominique, and Dear Govinda's answer. The way that I think about it is about in a way being boundaried and being intentional. I might just like Dear Govinda said, I might choose to go into thinking, into planning, and maybe it's that I schedule that. It doesn't necessarily mean that I put it in my planner, but I might say, okay, this is the time when I am thinking about the past or the future. And for me, it's making boundaries to make sure that if I want to think about the future, to make sure that I do that intentionally, so that I don't do it unintentionally, such as if I'm playing with my kids, but then I didn't set aside time to think about the thing, but it's important because it's a responsibility. And then that's going to leak into me doing other things. So for me, it's rather than multitasking by not doing it intentionally, it's single tasking by being intentional and doing it as its own activity that I'm present with. I'm present with my future thinking time, or I'm present with my thinking about the past time, because that's what this time is for, rather than, as I'm wanting to do something else, then I'm accidentally thinking about the past because I didn't give it time for it to be the thing that I'm doing in the present. That's how I think of it. And then the comment that I want to make on your lecture. I really like the connection that you made. You gave us references for relative time. You talked about the mayfly and how like that's its own life, its entire life in a day, and then we have our entire lives in whatever 50 to 100 years, and then Brahma has like 311 trillion 40 billion years. And then I like how you did the same thing with space. I mean, you didn't directly say, you were talking about the pale blue dot, and like me, like I'm the center of the world. That's how I see it. And so like for me, everything is where I go. Right now it's just this house, like, and then wherever the path that I walk on Java, like that's all that relatively exists to me. Okay, I know that my parents' house and work exists. So like that's like all of the world. And then I can think of like, wow, there's however many square miles of land to walk on in the entire planet. Wow, that's huge. And then it's like you said, that's just like a dust floating around in the sun ray. It's like in physics, oftentimes they talk about space-time, right? How like time and space are connected, and relativity and things like that. And so I like the connection there of our lifespan is insignificant, and then also our planet in terms of space is insignificant in relationship to everything that there is. So yeah, it's like a nice reminder of really the insignificance of both what I'm doing, where I'm doing it. Just like the whole thing is relatively insignificant, seen from the broader perspective of how long it'll last, and also like what a small infinitesimal fraction of the whole vastness of just the material world that it is.
Thank you. Yeah, that's such a, I'm glad you're reflecting on that. That's, yeah, such an important aspect of realizing our context. And I'm glad you said that, because in relation to what Dominique was sharing, I was thinking of like Achinta Beta Beta Tattva, and how we've been given like such a holistic, comprehensive philosophy and understanding of reality, and that, okay, being present doesn't just mean like, oh, it's like there's still, yeah, we can use our God-given intelligence at choice, consciously, to serve. And in the context of what you're saying, it's like, if we stop just at like how insignificant all of the material context is, then it's like, well, so yeah, what's the point? And that's largely, I see like the issue in a materialist, reductionist perspective on reality, because then it does create like somewhat of a, it's like, what then, what's the point of any of this? But by understanding the eternal aspect of it, the power of the soul, the meaning of the soul, and its relationship and its source, then it's not insignificant anymore. You know, then it's then like a pure devotee can use everything in this room to serve Krishna, and gives it meaning, gives all of this dead matter, it's spiritualized. Yeah, it gives it significance. So.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, George.
So I just want to share, thank you so much for the class. I was very inspired by your sharing and your analogies. Much of my relationship with time has been one of regret for as long as I can remember. Even yesterday, just thinking about the last 6 weeks and my relationship with sadhana and bhakti yoga, and just thinking, oh, I didn't do enough. Like I had this time that was given to me by Krishna's mercy, and I didn't read enough. I didn't chant. I didn't do all these things. And more increasingly, I am having awareness that I go into that mode, and I'm starting to think more so in terms of gratitude for the present, and being grateful for the opportunity to have chanted this morning and to be in this class right now, and focusing on that on that additive effect that just comes from being very, very grateful for like Krishna's mercy for me today and how I'm showing up today with all my mistakes. And then looking forward to the future, I really like that on his letter that Prabhupada had written to Krishna when he was coming from the Jaladuta, when he was disembarking, when he said, "Make me dance," just make me dance for the future, because so much of like my idea of what bhakti practice looks like, it's this like very militaristic thing where I'm doing a set amount of like, it's like production, you know what I mean? Like I'm producing a certain amount of red verses per day or rounds chanted and so forth. And this notion of just like make me dance, like applying my intelligence, and it might not look like reading the verse. It might just look like being present with my daughter's eyes, which is looking at me, and just serving her in that moment of sharing that love or care, and that's bhakti, like it says I'm doing this so I can serve this little Vaishnav, and just being present or utilizing my intelligence to see what's happening around me, and then maybe it looks like moving to Europe, maybe it looks like learning Dutch for Krishna, as long as like, maybe that's what it looks like, and in the end, consistently for me remembering that quote, just make me dance, maybe then that time when I'm feeling connected to Krishna, maybe that time is the most well spent time. So often I have these rigid structures that it should look like being like a yogi in a cave, whatever, and it, like David was sharing, it's like when I apply my intelligence and when I'm really grounded on bhakti, grounded in consistently doing some chanting and some reading, time spent serving Krishna could look like anything, I've realized, and really focusing on that gratitude in the moment of having him that base awareness and continuing through with that gratitude is I'm finding like almost like a slight shift towards that paradigm of regret and time to gratitude and hope, I guess, in the future. So yeah.
Thank you, George, so much for sharing from your experience. I'm live and enthused to hear it seems like shifting from like a heaviness with yourself and with rigidity and sort of freeing yourself, coming out of this box of what it has to look like, and saying that bhakti is not defined by within a box. It's not it's not constricted to a specific action. It can be anything if it's truly done in service. And I for me, like, I also see I have a tendency to go to one extreme of like shame and having, I wouldn't even say it's regret, it's just like deep guilt and shame. It's like very grungy. It's just like, it's worthless and pointless. And I hear what you said about like the militaristic style, or going into a cave. Like I definitely resonate with that sort of mentality, is that it needs to look like this, and I need to like wake up on the dot and shower like this and shape like this, and if it doesn't look like that, then I'm a failure and then I should just quit. So it's coming out of that for me is definitely also very important, coming into a space of acceptance and endeavoring to be grateful for the opportunities that we do have, that we've been given, and to be grateful to ourselves for the small steps and the big leaps we're making. I definitely think that's a big, it's an important factor. And then, whenever for me, it also just comes up this like niyamagraha, like not following rules and regulations or following really rigidly. And that's something I'm constantly needing to remind myself, because it's like, okay, where is that actually, how does that actually look like? Because I'm always wanting to go between like, whatever, like this, from this extreme to the other. So, dear Govinda, Prabhu, if you want to share something in relation to that.
Wow, I appreciate the sharing and discussion. I'm just noting in this purport, Prabhupada uses that metaphorical term at least twice, infection. So just in our days of pandemic and lockdown and all of that, I think it's interesting because Srila Prabhupada uses that analogy a lot, and sometimes he'll use the terms inoculation, vaccination, and infection, and he emphasizes the point here. He often emphasizes the point that we're exposed to the material disease. He uses the material infection. We're all exposed. And just like, okay, we're all exposed to so many diseases all the time, but we don't get infected. We don't contract the disease if we're inoculated. And so the inoculation, that's this verse. It's discussing topics of the all good personality of Godhead. And so we're exposed to the material infection. And that doesn't mean that we need to be infected. It doesn't mean that we need to contract the disease. And because, the material infection, I so much appreciated how you discussed about time. And so time pushes everything along towards disease, towards old age, towards death. And as this verse, Ayur Hati Vaipumsam, is emphasizing, to the extent that we misidentify the self with the body, then we're crushed. And so I like how you talked about that timeless space that comes from from absorbing ourselves in this hearing and chanting, and absorbing ourselves in the different limbs of Bhakti yoga, and of course, to be in a sense, the goal is to spontaneously be absorbed steadily in the different processes of Bhakti yoga, and that's timeless existence. That existence is conspicuous by the absence of material time, and that's possible even in this body. And then at the same time, for those of us who are not there, it's imperative that we follow sadhana bhakti under the guidance of someone who's truly on the stage of spontaneous bhakti. Someone like Srila Prabhupada or the six Goswamis. It's said about the six Goswamis, Sankhya Purvaka Namagana Natibi Kalava Sani Krita Nidra Hara Vihara Kadi Vijitel Chatyanta Dina Chaya Radha Krishna Unasmita Madurimanandena Samohita Pande Upasanatana Raghuyugo Sri Jiva Gopalaka, that they were chanting and bowing down and according to a mathematic sankhya, according to a scheduled measurement, counting according to a quantitative measurement, and by such activities as these, they conquered over sleeping and eating, and were always meek and humble, and chanted by the remembrance of Radha and Krishna. So to come to that point of spontaneously being absorbed in bhakti, if we're in the conditioned state, it means doing the austerity of making commitments and following them, and at the same time, as the conversation between you and George discussed, that not just following some rules and regulations and missing the point of actual transformation of heart from mundane to godly, not just following and missing the point, and it becomes mechanical. Following with enthusiasm, that's the actual spirit. And at the same time, there's also the trap of, in the name of being spontaneous, that we whimsically neglect commitments, rules, regulations, structures that will really support us in progressing towards moving towards this timeless space. Hare Krishna. Thanks for listening.
Thank you, Prabhu.
Hare Krishna. I'm just reflecting on the discussion about regret and shame and guilt about how time was spent in the past. I know I experienced that a lot. And I was like contemplating, like, well, first of all, recently, over the last maybe like 6 months to a year, I've gotten some breakthroughs with how to like respond to like that regret and shame and guilt. And because I realized like judging myself harshly won't move me forward, and my goal is more important to me than staying stuck in the habit of doing that thing, or staying stuck in a grungy of guilt and shame. So I'm willing to be compassionate to myself because I actually want to move forward. Like I have a higher vision of my life. So I have gotten comfortable with like, okay, this is where I'm at, and I'm starting over today, or I'm starting over tomorrow morning. It's a new day. I have my whole life ahead of me. I have eternity ahead of me, and I'm not willing to stay stuck. So I've had some progress with it. And then as we were talking just now, and I was listening to you, dear Govinda, I was thinking, you know how like we can't realize everything at once? Like our self-realization process it's gradual and it happens over time. And actually, I believe it's like an eternal process of realizations. So that means, does that mean by definition that there are things that we are ignoring until we get to that point where that realization comes to the surface? So there's always something that's kind of, is it true that there's always something that we're not giving attention to, that we're in the mode of ignorance about until it's time for it to come up? And if that's true, then we're also constantly in the process of realizing, oh, I didn't know that yet. I was handling that the wrong way. And it's like a constant thing. It's not like something that happens once a month or once a year. It's like, oh, I didn't face that yet. Oh, I didn't realize that yet. I didn't cultivate that yet. I don't have that quality yet. And it's always like if we're in a real rigorous self-realization process, we're always holding space for the thing that we didn't realize yet. Anyway, it's an interesting thought to just live with that fact. Like we didn't have that realization yet. We didn't transform that yet. It's always there. Anyway, any thoughts?
I'm reminded of pretty much every time I read Prabhupada's books or read his lectures or hear a lecture, it's like I'll read his book and it could be something I've read 7, 8, 15 times, and it's like, oh, that wasn't there before. That definitely wasn't there when I read it in 1984, and it wasn't there when I read it 4 or 5 years ago, because of course it was there, but I wasn't ready for that realization. So it was just mechanical reading. I was in tamas as I was reading, still purifying. I was in tamas, and now I'm a little more prepared for that, to receive and absorb. So I appreciate, that realization about realization. And, I would say that's true while we're in the modes of nature. That, I was just so much in ignorance then I couldn't receive or absorb that point, that quality, that powerful statement from Prabhupada. And my understanding, it's true also for the pure devotee who's beyond the mode of nature, but the process, it's no longer founded in ignorance. It's founded in the ever expansive nature of the soul. So that the pure devotee is also expanding in realization and love and knowledge. And so the next day they have realization that's even more intense and fuller and deeper than the previous day, where it's described that the gopis' love for Krishna increases by millions of times at each moment, So it's not that in the previous moment they were in ignorance. That's it. So that whole process of expansion and deepening, it's based on transcendence. Whereas in the modes of nature, it's based on ignorance gradually being transformed to sattva and some glimpses of transcendence.
Thank you, Prabhu. I was reflecting on your comments before around the disease, the infection of material existence, and the like inoculation of that, and thinking about how we've been given a very specific formula, a very specific medicine in the Harinam, in Krishna's names, in a number of rounds to chant that I believe is given to challenge us and also to meet us where we're at. And Prabhupada so much, and in Shastra is a gradual process and to be steady more than to like overreach, and for me thinking of it in terms of medicine, a medical regimen, and just like trusting my doctor, it's actually quite relieving and scientific, and it's quite liberating actually, the principles of freedom. It's interesting to for me to experience that back and forth between rigidity and looseness, and that's an interesting duality and dichotomy when if I look at what we've been given in the context, it's like perfectly kind of like middle road and very like gradual, scientific, and at the same time there's like all opportunity for quantum leaps and jumps. And
it's balanced. It's a dynamic, growth-inspiring balance. Thank you, Narayan.
Dr. Keith, last comment.
I just wanted to ask Daru if he wanted to make contact outside of the class.
In contact with you particularly, or what?
Yeah, if you would send your phone number through the message, and we can make contact after class.
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay.
All right, thank you everyone. Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Dear Govinda.
Yeah.
I'm just not sure even how to do that simple